You've just arrived back in the UK, but you were in Bakhmut last week. What were the scenes there when you were on the ground?
Alexis, yes. I was in the centre of Bakhmut city last week, but I spent quite a lot of time there really since December when I was making film for the Times there in December. So there is intense fighting in Bakhmut, but there has been intense fighting really for months. What's changed in the last few days, last couple of weeks indeed, is that the Wagner group have got a kind of C-shape encirclement going. If you think of it as clock face, they probably got from about 11 o'clock through midday and all the way around to about 7 o'clock around the Ukrainian forces defending the city. So there's a big problem for the Ukrainians because they've only got one road left in and out, and that's exposed visually to the Russians, so it's shelled a lot. They can still just get wounded and ammunition in and out, but in doing so, they're open to fire. That's a big problem for them. It's also a hugely important symbolic battle because both sides have vested so much importance, the Russians in capturing it, the Ukrainians in defending it. So it seems it's in quite a culminating phase, although it might not wrap up quite as quickly as people think. There's thousands of Ukrainian soldiers there. Not very easy for the Russians to close that last bit of the circle, nor for the Ukrainians to get out of it.
Why is the city itself being targeted so hard by the Russian army? If you look at it on the map, it is in that eastern seaboard, I beg your pardon, not eastern seaboard, but the eastern edges of what is now still controlled by Ukraine. What's the significance of the town, Anthony?
It's sitting on a road hub, which leads into the economic heartland of the Donbass, the eastern region, into areas still controlled by Ukraine. So from Bakhmut, you get an easy road, well, not easy road, but fairly close road straight to the cities like Kramatorsk and Slovyansk. There's been a tendency, I think, in Western commentators to downplay the significance of the city in the last couple of weeks, but it is of strategic importance. Essentially, it's a road hub.
The mayor has been talking about the 4,000 civilians that are still living in the city. They're in shelters, no access to gas, electricity or water. How long can these people survive in the city?
Well, it's amazing how long they do survive, because back in December on the eastern side of Bakhmut, now this is territory which was ceded, actually, it seems, by the Ukrainians to the Russians in the last 48 hours. The eastern half of the city, the Ukrainians have consolidated their lines now along the river, which bisects the city north to south. But in the eastern city, which was a scene of heavy fighting in December, people living in basements there for weeks and weeks at a time. They've got their own sort of candles made out of grease, food stocks saved up. What tends to happen is a lot of those people are actually waiting for the Russians to arrive. There are people who have chosen to stay on in the hope that they see it, they'll be liberated by Russian forces. There are also some people who are too poor and too isolated, or perhaps elderly and live alone, who can't get out. I would say it's probably less than 4,000, probably a couple of thousand. But when the Russians do come to those areas, either basically everyone's taken off to filtration centres where they're assessed to be whatever level of risk the Russians define. And many of those waiting are waiting for the Russians, I think it's fair to say.